Good evening and welcome to the 5-8, where we discuss each of the week's 5 most fucked up topics for 8 minutes. 5 topics, 8 minutes. Except as you can see, I'm hosting this show solo tonight. LB, she's fine. She's okay, but she couldn't go tonight. She's not feeling well. She'll be back next week. But I'm doing this solo in the hosting seat. So it's not going to be 5 topics. I decided what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 5 from 8 and do 3 topics, as you can see on the scroll. So that's how we're going to do it. So 3 topics, 8 minutes each, a host, one excellent guest who I see now in the green room, but we haven't done the audio, so I'm thinking it'll work out. And some singing, a lot of curse words, and as many cocktails as we deem necessary. And my friends, this is a week that we might need ample cocktails. I don't know. I don't want to have too much tonight because tomorrow is a busy day. It's the No Kings Day. I think, lots of people are going to take to the street tomorrow. And we'll get to that. So again, LB, she's fine. She's okay. She's not feeling well. So she's sitting this one out. She's on the IR. She'll be back next week. So we're gonna do this solo, and what we're gonna do is 3 topics, and my guest is gonna come on for the second topic, and that's gonna be like basically 3 topics in length. Makes sense to me. So that's what's going on. Lots of things to discuss, but I just want to start. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, said the thing where he wants to tar and feather Gavin Newsom, and I don't know. People were upset by it, but I'm not down with the lingo. Is that like a sex thing? I feel like it's a sex thing. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like he's sending some sort of message there, but I'm not sure. Not great either way. So anyway, all right. I don't want to blather too much before we get to the actual topic, since it's just going to be me blathering here for 8 minutes or however long this takes. And it might not even be 8 minutes. What I wanted to start with tonight, and this is what's the frequency, Kenneth topic. I wanted to start about just take a gander at what's going on. Just stop and pause and look around at the map of the world to see what's happening right now. We're still a week away from the 5-month mark of the Donald Trump redux, what I call it, the second term. Only 5 months. We've been not even 5 months yet, and everything is it's just crazy, right? But I want to focus on foreign policy because of obviously the events in Iran last night and today. Trump directly or indirectly contributed to that, and I want to just, like I said, just pause and look at what happened now. When Biden came in, just to remind everybody, just to set the record straight, Biden, or the robot Biden with his auto pen, I suppose, whoever was in charge, it looked like Biden to me. Pretty sure it was Biden. Basically, reassembles NATO, reassures our allies, and brings the United States back into the fold of democratic countries. Right? Was NATO hanging on off the precipice? And as I've said many, many times, the reason that there has been almost no wars in Europe for, since 1949, no big ones anyway, is because of NATO. It's because of the Pax Americana. It's because of NATO. And Trump comes in and he's immediately trying to destroy that, right? Which is preposterous. I mean, this is literally the thing that is the most responsible for peace in the Western world. And Trump is just like, screw it. Luxembourg isn't paying enough. We have to, we have to destroy this thing. So Biden comes in, he fixes it. And that's what is given to Trump when he starts the second term, right? So what happens? Where are we? Okay. First, the war in Gaza. So Trump had said, I'm going to come in, I'm going to stop the war there, I'm going to bring peace. I guess probably he's going to build condos in Gaza City. 5 months in, hasn't happened. There's been nothing from Trump or the administration really at all to try to lean on Netanyahu to stop what's happening there, the genocide that's happening there. I know people were irritated with Biden, and rightly so. He wasn't doing enough. But I do think that Biden was trying to curb Bibi's more bloodthirsty impulses, and Trump is just basically out golfing, which is bad. So, but he said he was going to, bring peace to the Middle East, right? Even though I thought Jared Kushner was supposed to bring us peace to the Middle East already, but I don't know. I'm getting the narratives mixed up. So that didn't happen. The war in Ukraine, he's going to solve that day one, whatever, he's going to solve the war in Ukraine. He's going to bring peace. He's going to bring everybody to the table. He's going to have a ceasefire. Not happening. The one thing that we thought, and maybe even Trump thought that he could depend on with himself is, hey, maybe I have some leeway with Putin, my benefactor. As it turns out, he does not. Zelensky was in the Oval Office. Trump and Vance humiliated him, copped Russian talking points and the Kremlin's narrative, the lie about how that war started, right to Zelensky's face. He tried to war-splain him about what's going on in Ukraine. Everything that he's done so far has been basically to help Russia and scuttle it. And what has happened because of that? Has there been a ceasefire? No. Putin's just laughing at him, literally laughing at him on TV in Russia, showing naked pictures of his wife, laughing, and, making him, playing him at the fool, oh, you want to have the negotiations? We're going to do that. And then on the eve of the negotiations, sending rockets into Kyiv, stuff like that. So there's nothing on that front has happened. That was a promise that he made. He was going to stop the war right away. You can go back and look at his quote unquote truth socials and see. So that didn't happen. Not only did it not happen, I mean, the catastrophic results of not helping Ukraine in a timely fashion, which Biden didn't do enough of either, but at least he was trying to help them. Trump has done nothing, and Ukraine sits in a position where they could knock off the greatest enemy to the United States and to world democracy. And all we have to do is give them weapons. We don't have to send in troops. We just have to give them stuff, which, by the way, we already have laying around. All the money that the Republicans are mad about is just money that is going to get spent here in the United States, where our defense industry makes stuff to replace the stuff that we're giving to Ukraine. And they don't want to even do that. So that's a total joke. It makes everybody in the world less safe. So, okay, so Gaza, so Ukraine, total failures, right? Then he's screwing up relationships with our allies, with Canada. How the fuck can you screw that up, man? How can you screw up Canada? We all like Canada. Everyone in the United States loves Canada. This is our neighbor, our good friend, and Trump comes in and just tries to ruin that. And I think one of the results of that is that his guy Polyev didn't even win re-election, let alone get to be prime minister. We've got Carney in there now. So even if you're a MAGA, the position on Canada has not worked because your MAGA candidate did not make it, right? And Trump is that. The same thing with Mexico. There's tension with Mexico, which is being obviously exacerbated by all the stuff going on with ICE and these horrible raids, which we'll get to in a few minutes. Greenland, it's pissing off the Danes. It's not our place. It belongs to Greenland. The people in Greenland want to remain with Denmark. That's it. He's still sabering around, talking about stuff. And I mean, even if he's supposed to be Alexander the Great or something, then he can't even do that. He can't even do that right. His plan is, I'll just send JD Vance there, which, by the way, is never a plan that's worked. Whether you're sending JD Vance to an island country or to a furniture outlet, sending in JD Vance, never the way to go. Never a smart idea. So he screwed that up. Puerto Rico wants to rejoin Spain. That's how bad it is there. For some reason, I suppose, the paper towels that Trump lovingly threw at the Puerto Ricans in their hour of need didn't convince them that he had the best interest of Puerto Rico at heart. The intelligence services are being, run by a Kremlin asset who's also cultist in this weirdo cult from Hawaii where they eat toenails, and the guy's the most virulent homophobe I've ever heard. And, nobody's giving us secrets anymore. We don't know the intelligence, the ability of our intelligence community to liaise with the intelligence services in other countries has been completely decapitated. So that's not great. And there's this whole Israel-Iran thing. Now, I've read a bunch about this. I don't want to talk about this out of turn because I'm not an expert in this by any means, but I've read up on it. People that I trust who are experts. If Iran really was making nuclear reactors and Israel went in there and just blew up the nuclear reactors, that's probably, I'm going to say, a net positive. It could very well be that this, is a domino that causes the collapse of the Ayatollah, which would be wonderful. If we had a democratic Iran, would be wonderful. It's a, great people, great culture. As Trump pointed out, the Iranian Empire, which isn't a thing. Persian, I think he means. But the only reason Israel had to do that is because Trump pulled out of the treaty, of the nuclear treaty, where they weren't allowed to do this stuff. And why did he pull out of it? Because it was Obama's thing and he doesn't like Obama. That's the main reason. So not only that, and I'm not even talking about the defense secretary sending out war plans on signal chats. The only basically proxy force Iran has left is the Houthis. That's the only one that they have left that has anything, because Pete Hegseth keeps telling them where we're going to hit them, right? So that's where Trump is. Any country basically around the world you look at, where's the benefit that we're getting? Even the countries that are the authoritarian countries don't like us right now, except for El Salvador. So, so if your whole idea of, USA and American might is to be on good relationship with the dictator of El Salvador, congratulations. Your guy was, he's done a wonderful job. He's doing a wonderful job. So that's what I have to say about that. Let's see. Yeah, I'm doing okay on time. But he's a failure in other ways too, obviously. But the foreign policy has been a disaster, an unmitigated disaster. And I think because we're so busy inside the United States worrying about what's happening inside the United States, and with good reason, maybe we don't think about it as much as we should, but it has been a disaster and it's his fault. So that's what's going on there. Now, usually we have the second topic now, and we're not going to do the second topic now. Instead, we're going to proceed right to, the media, which is something that we do every week. And, something's going on in Los Angeles, guys. I think someone has called in the troops.
From the piers of Santa Monica, down the posh Rodeo Drive, through the stands of Dodger Stadium, up and down the 405. We have read the Insurrection Act, but we don't know what it means. We are just following orders. We are Donald Trump's Marines. It's a group of peaceful protesters. It is not a violent mob. Still we march on the Home Depot so that ICE can do its job. And when we've secured Los Angeles, we will help the cops in Queens. To hell with Posse Comitatus. We are Donald Trump's Marines.
All right. Thank you to Chunk. Whoops, that's the wrong thing. Dishonorable. Here we go. Let's put this back up. Thank you so much to Chunk for animating that. The great Chunk does the animations. They always enhance so beautifully the song. So anyway, that I just can't even. And I can't even by myself. 18 minutes is too long. So without further ado, we're going to bring on our guest. You know him well. He's the co-founder and the executive director of Court Accountability. He's a contributor on the Midas Touches Legal AF. Is it AF or is it as fuck? Are we allowed to say legal as fuck? You have to tell me that. He's the former general counsel to Senator Whitehouse. Alex Aronson, welcome. There you go. There you are. How are you?
Hey, Greg. It's good to see you. Thanks for having me back.
No, thanks for coming on. And LB sends her regrets because she was looking forward to talking to you.
I miss Stephanie.
Lots of things to ask you. So before we get into the big things, the first question that I want to know is like, how are you? Because things are a little bit crazy, and you're right in the thick of everything. So how are you? How are you doing? How are you feeling? How is your pessimism meter going today?
I'm doing okay. I worked in the Senate for 5 years during the Trump years and a little bit during Biden. And we decided, my family and I decided to move to an undisclosed location in the woods in Massachusetts. And so that's been really lovely. And having the kind of like peace and tranquility of nature and the nature trails that I've taken advantage of with my dog has been really, I've got this 12-year-old dog, like she's reaching the end of her days. And it's nice to have that because the world is so nuts. But no, the work has been good. I mean, we started this organization 2 years ago around this time to get to the bottom of the scheme of corrupting influence that had been brought to bear for decades on the Supreme Court. I think we've made, together with Lisa Graves, who I know your community here loves and is really familiar with.
Oh, yes.
To sort of try to create a beat of investigative journalism to help Americans understand that the courts had been corrupted, captured, weaponized by big special interests, the fossil fuel lobby, trying to strip away America's protections for clean air and clean water and workplace protections and consumer protections and the like, advance a theocratic agenda, keep alive the spirit of the lost cause in a white supremacist voter suppression agenda and let discrimination run rampant, all the stuff we're seeing now. So I think that work has been tremendously important in helping contextualize what's happening now and the role of the courts and the law in bringing us to this very scary place. And so, I think as each week brings new excesses, new overreach, new fascist implementation of the Project 2025 agenda, the MAGA fascism agenda, we're trying to make sense of it, not just for our community of advocates and movement leaders that we work with, the Hill allies and elected leaders that I think, frankly, are sort of looking at this progression much too much like individualistically in the kind of like, attention economy news cycle that we're processing. But it's absolutely essential that we take a step back and understand the context so that we can understand, not just what brought us here, but how we can start to get ourselves out of it.
Well, you guys are doing great work. I know, I'm on the mailing list, obviously, and I rely on it to know what's happening and stuff like that. But tell everybody, just plug Court Accountability and plug can we call it legal as fuck, or do we have to say legal AF?
I think so. Actually, I don't remember. They have some other cute AF thing that they do with that. So it stands for something else, I think, technically, but I think it's a little tongue in cheek. But
Air Force?
Yeah, the Legal Air Force. It's a legal politics podcast with the Midas Touch Network, which has been wonderful for us. We sometimes show up as a guest, like we do with you, but it's been a wonderful platform for us to be able to just kind of like get on StreamYard, click record, and actually use it as an organizing vehicle to bring our organizing network to folks, because everybody that we work with is trying to engage people through digital platforms and call people to action when things are really important and we need to mobilize folks. So it's been fun. But Court Accountability is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We do a number of things. We do investigative research work. Nothing too crazy. We do open source investigative research work, connecting the dots through these financial networks to the legal cases and the administrative actions, state legislation, other places where the authoritarian agenda is manifesting. We track those activities to the operatives, funders, and interests that are driving this agenda. And a lot of what we do is connect the dots across issue areas, because I think one of the things that this shock and awe offensive is producing is this sense of overwhelm, where it feels like it's just coming from every direction. And whatever your issue is, whatever the thing you care about most, it's hard not to think about just how do we, get into sort of a defensive alignment and protect what we've got from this assault. And, we think, and we can show and prove through the research work that all of these attacks across the board are being funded and driven by the same set of donors and operatives. And if we have that common understanding and context, we're going to be able to much better organize across our silos, across our political disagreements, and across our ideologies to build a movement for democracy, for a better future for this country. And so from the research work, we do a lot of advocacy and organizing to try to build that context, equip our allies with facts so that they can do their work better. And then we do a lot of work on the Hill, where I used to work, as you mentioned, with Senator Whitehouse, working with staff and members as they think through oversight, legislative, and other responses to what's happening in the world.
So can you tell Senator Schumer that we don't need any more strongly worded letters? I mean,
we do that.
Very strongly worded, maybe, but
we do that in our ways. We're just a small shop. We don't carry a very big stick, but we do have a broad network and a finger on the pulse of what's happening in various corners of the Democratic base and the progressive movement. And so, working with those allies, that's a lot of the work, right? Is making enough noise and building enough power so that Schumer listens to those interests rather than the interests of big wealthy donors who do carry very large sticks, to this day within the Democratic Party, even as the Republicans have figured out, and I think in abject bad faith, have figured out that populist messaging and, fighting back against the bullshit institutions is the way to go politically. So, yeah, I mean, that's what we're trying to do. And we've had some success with Schumer, but overall, I think he's sort of a personification right now of a deeply muddled democratic politics, a failure to see what's happening to our country and to respond with appropriate urgency and force.
I saw that there's a new Jurassic Park movie, and I saw he's one of the dinosaurs in the Jurassic Park movie. It's crazy.
Well, I might have shared this on this program before, but like the gerontocracy in the Senate's a real thing. I mean, the Senate is deeply problematic just as a structural matter within our constitutional system because of its baked in malapportionment. There's so many relics of slave power in the Senate. And then they've kind of buy the bullshit that, is from George Washington, if I'm not mistaken, the idea of the Senate as a cooling saucer for the rabble rousing hot tempers of the House.
Right.
But, what I think that's redounded to in modern politics is the House is living in just a much more realistic version of America in 2025. They've got the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, right, and the Lauren Boeberts to make that very clear day in and day out. You have more and more of those folks in the Senate too. But on the Senate side, even now, after all of this abuse of power, after all of this, you can't describe it with any other adjective than fascist or authoritarian or autocratic. There's still sort of the Senate Democrats are still trying to make peace and find bipartisanship and take what they can get rather than locking arms and fighting for all that, with all they've got for our future.
Yeah, no, it's very, very frustrating to watch. And I know you do great work on this, and I know that you have the right attitude about it historically as a change agent in a good way. So, okay, we'll go there now. Start this on the topic of sitting senators. What happened yesterday is that one of our senators from the great state of California, Alex Padilla, was detained by the ICE Gestapo, or actually, I guess, the local cops working on behalf of the ICE Gestapo, for daring to ask a question during the part in Kristi Noem's speech where she was talking about occupying California. That comes on the heels of people in Los Angeles getting rounded up and arrested who are A, protesting peacefully, B, journalists who are, saying that they're journalists, and C, being arrested by cops, not by LAPD, not by federal agents or anything like that, not as part of the ICE stuff, just for protesting. So we've got all of that. Another House representative is under indictment. They finally found a grand jury, putting the "you can indict a ham sandwich" axiom into effect. This is all really, really dangerous stuff. And, again, we're not even 5 months into this. What are your thoughts about what's happening? Like, how close there is a point at which we're going to topple. How close are we to that point? What can people do about it? What are you thinking? What are your thoughts about all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think this gets back to one of your earlier questions about sort of how I'm feeling and sort of optimism and pessimism. Like, obviously, this stuff is really, really scary, right? What's happening in Los Angeles and the pretext under which they are very clearly marching towards invocation of the Insurrection Act, which was always the plan, right? And we saw the trial run of this at the end of the last administration. We saw it laid out in Project 2025. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat, so let me just drink some water, and you can say something, and then
I think what we'll do is we'll have a drink break. I think that's what we do. We have a nice drink break. But what I've observed is not having LB here, it makes it harder for me to sip this thing.
And I've got a mocktail here. We're doing this, like, for some reason we chose May through August to do a 3.
Uh-oh, you froze on me. Or did I freeze?
Internet. Did I come back? Did you find me?
You came back. Your voice came back.
Okay,
there you are. There you are.
Sorry
Okay.
about that.
No, you're fine.
So, so really bad, right? This is like incredibly aggressive escalation of an already very far gone constitutional crisis, cascading series of constitutional crises. I actually, I don't want to be mistaken in what I'm saying here. Every single additional step towards full-throated autocracy is deeply, deeply dangerous, and we should not welcome it. At the same time, I think too many Americans are living under an illusion that we are still a democracy in any sense of the word, that we have guardrails against a fascist dictator right now in the form of courts, in the form of state power. I think in the months between, say, February and maybe the middle of May, as all of these lower court orders were being obtained by really great litigators who were ready for this and jumped in to challenge these illegal, unconstitutional executive orders, I think it projected a sense of normalcy that this is sort of under control. We're not perhaps in as much of a crisis as we feared. I think that's wrong, right? Everything we're seeing from the Roberts majority, and listen, I don't think Roberts and his friends on the court particularly like the way Trump and Russell Vogt and Project 2025 are going about what they're doing. I don't think they like the rhetoric being leveled at their fellow judges. But in terms of outcomes and ideology and big picture goals, they're very, very aligned. And so we've got that for one, right? Even as these lower court judges appointed by presidents of both parties across the board stand up to Trump, the Supreme Court has been a release valve. That hasn't been, I think, properly covered. That story hasn't been told quite correctly. Take the Abrego Garcia case, where nominally Trump lost, and ultimately, yes, he did bring Abrego Garcia back, but the decision from the Supreme Court, that used this very loose language, facilitate, do what he can, and they took all advantage of that. And even now, as they formally comply with that Supreme Court order to bring Abrego Garcia back, they're doing so with what seem to be cooked up criminal charges, very, very serious trafficking and drug and human trafficking charges. And so if we take a look at that situation and say, oh, well, the rule of law prevailed, we still have our country, the law still exists here, I don't know that that's a law that I want to accede to. And I do worry that if we continue down this path of sort of slowly giving up our rights, our freedoms, our core values, ideas like due process, watering these things down, and saying it's okay because the court said this is all right and they're complying with the court, this is just more slow bleed. This is the same slow bleed dynamic that brought us to this place in the first place. And so there is, I think, some silver lining here. to the aggressive escalation of this fascist program, because increasingly people are just seeing what's happening, right? They're going to start to feel the harms of this devastating budget bill. They're going to see the global catastrophe on foreign policy that you're describing. They're going to see, due process violated in their communities as people they know start to get picked up. Today I saw reporting, it might have just been in a private channel, but that ICE is picking up nannies on playgrounds who are taking care of kids.
Oh, God.
And leaving the kids without anybody to take care of them. So, I think as stories like that start to bubble up and become real in our communities, in this moment, this very tenuous moment where, query the validity and free and fairness of our 2026 elections and 2028 elections, those are important questions. But while we still have something, it's important that we have as broad and deep and urgent an understanding about the time in our history that we are living through, so that we can mobilize, so that people can get off the sidelines and be a part of the solution.
Thank you for that. When you're talking about Garcia and the charges, the word to use is trumped up charges. Yeah. It's just trumped up. It's just right there for so there's a bunch of things I want to ask you that there's 6 different things, so I can go in 6 different directions, but let's go with the justices and stop talking about them because I hate them so much. Well, I can't understand, like, I get that they're fascists or reactionaries or whatever word you want to use. I'm talking, of course, about Thomas and Alito and Roberts and I think that Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. I think Barrett is probably in her own category. I think she can stay. The other ones have to go. But like, what's in it for them? Like, I don't get it. Like, if Trump comes in and this is successful and he becomes a full-on dictator, the Supreme Court has zero power. They have no power to do anything. And in fact, they're the most likely people to get arrested or detained. So all of the bullshit that they're doing just gets pissed away. And similarly, Leonard Leo, who you guys have done a great job kind of shining the light on, speaking of dark money funding and all kinds of stuff.
You too.
Yes, thank you. The dark money funding. The guy, and say what you will about him, and I've said plenty, he's a lawyer and he likes rule of law stuff. So how is it that he can really get in bed with Trump and be okay with what's going on, which is basically a complete erosion of the rule of law? It's like Jenga. They're just pulling shit out and everything's collapsing. What's the point of going to law school if there are no laws? Like, what's in their brain? Why are they doing this? I'm talking about from their own sense of self-preservation now, not because they're good people, because they're clearly not.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack here, and it's really nuanced and complicated. And I'm still working through it. I've written 2 pieces on this feud between Leo and Trump. But even, and I write to try to mostly just to like clarify my thoughts and make sure I'm thinking about every angle. But even still, I'm still trying to unpack it all. Listen, I think the justices recognize that they raised this leopard and it's now on the verge of eating their face. And so, if they've got a couple of choices, right? If Trump is very flagrantly violating the law and the Constitution, say this impoundment situation where he's claiming inherent impoundment authority and basically going directly for Congress's power of the purse. Now, I think they would, if given Veritas serum, the truth serum from Harry Potter, we're in the middle of Harry Potter.
I thought that was a law school term. I was just thinking, stop with this law school stuff.
Yeah, I know we're not supposed to be reading Harry Potter and denounced J.K. Rowling, but those books are good. I think they clearly see, they would know that's constitutional, the unconstitutional, right? That's Congress's core constitutional power. That's unanimous precedent on this question from the Nixon era. I don't know that they will reach that holding unanimously. I think there's a good chance when those cases start to get decided, probably next term, they're going to accommodate Trump. I don't think they'll go whole hog. Listen, I think if they try to stop what Trump is doing outright, and it was something they know is important to Trump, like his impoundment program, like the birthright citizen executive order, they know that the accelerationists, and I think that's a good word for these folks like Russell Vogt, within the Project 2025 coalition that are running the show, J.D. Vance very much included. Absolutely. They will steamroll them, and we've seen this. They've said so. John Roberts saw this last year in his year-end report, where after denouncing Democrats, without really naming them, it was clear whom he was talking about, denouncing Democrats for criticizing the justices for being corrupt. He conflated that with, threats of violence. He, in the last part of his report, he foretold what we are living through now, which is that that Trump is not going to respect the court's decisions and is going to put a ton of pressure on them. It's striking, actually, with that insight that he had then, that he nevertheless reached that holding in Trump versus United States to give him sweeping immunity. And I have a lot of questions about their motivations and, understanding about what they were actually doing there. I think I'm pretty cynical about these guys and their bad faith, but I actually do wonder if Kavanaugh and Roberts didn't quite realize just what they were doing there.
It seems like with that thing where Roberts was writing the passage you just said, that was poor me, poor John Roberts. Oh, the judges, we're not getting the respect. It was like a violin play rather than anything insightful. That's my take on it. But anyway, I cut you off. Keep going.
Well, I'm rambling, but
no, it's good.
Friday night, and I've got a mocktail.
What is your mocktail, by the way?
It's a phony Negroni. It's a phony mezcal Negroni.
Phony Negroni that's a great name.
Pretty good. Yeah, I mean, it's not bad. It's got, because I like bitter. I want bitter. What are they called? Like the Italian. I don't know. I'm not fancy enough to.
Caprani.
Campari is a type of. Yeah. Anyway, that's not what people are heading up.
You'd be surprised.
So if you try to stop them outright, they're just going to get bulldozed. And like I said earlier, their agenda remains generally aligned, right? They want to do all the same stuff. They want to weaken the regulatory state when it's convenient for them. They want to continue to allow voter suppression of Black and brown communities. They want to allow aggrieved white plaintiffs to bring reverse discrimination suits. They want to probably get towards overturning Obergefell. There's serious moves to overturn Obergefell, continue their war on LGBTQ kids, reproductive healthcare access. Like, this is all in alignment, and you can see it in Project 2025 and its funders, which have like 2/3 overlap with Leonard Leo's world. Leonard Leo has funding connections to 2/3 of the groups in Project 2025. And so I think the disagreements between the justices and Trump are not about rule of law. It's mostly about strategy, rhetoric, tone, preservation of perceptions of legitimacy. And so I guess I would take issue on some level with your note about Leo and having any attachment to the rule of law. I don't think he has any attachment to the rule of law at all. I think he has his attachment to rule by law, rule by his law. And so this is the challenge of the moment we're living through, right? As we, people who are scared of what Trump is doing, who saw some value in our very imperfect but quasi-functional system that existed before, where the court, you could argue was doing law. It's a great comfort to us to have this idea that these are judges doing law, but they're not, right? And they've proven that to us time and again with their abandonment of originalism when it's inconvenient, with even the historical roots of originalism as a political doctrine designed as a palatable race-neutral alternative to nullification after Brown versus Board of Education. Like, that's the root of this thing, right? So it was never about judicial restraint. It was never about the text of the Constitution or the original meaning of the Constitution. It was about a really persuasive, like sales pitch for a political project through the courts. And it's the other really thing that's interesting that's going on is there's real pressure on originalism from the right within the right-wing legal movement. And I think that might be motivating some of this fight as well from the J.D. Vance side of things at the FedSoc.
What do you make of and I know you've written about this, but what do you make of the Trump calling out Leonard Leo. Therefore, now the New York Times is allowed to write about him, and calling him a sleazebag, which is, it's just funny.
Hey, even a broken clock, right?
Yeah.
Well, I like it. I think it's good. I think
Mhm.
wedges within the authoritarian faction are healthy and good, and we should seek to drive them deeper. Have had some disagreement. The second piece I wrote was actually in response to a couple pieces, one by a conservative that people probably know, David French in the New York Times, who comes from the conservative legal movement and was, like appalled on Leo's behalf, and elevated
He
him as
conflates
a
Leo
principal.
with the Federalist Society. He
Yeah.
conflates the two things, and they're different.
Well, they are the same. They are really the same. But then even liberal law professors like Michael Dorff, who has this really excellent blog called Dorff on Law, he was saying, in a fight between a fascist and somebody that we really disagree with, but at the end of the day is committed to the rule of law, we should try to break bread, build coalition with Leo and with this Federalist Society contingent. And I push back on that. And from my priors of really deeply believing in the importance of cross ideological movement building, like this is a moment for us to be, I think, reckoning with each of our sides' missteps in bringing us here, making amends, finding common ground, and building together. But to me, that doesn't mean like opening the gates of Troy to the Greek horse and bringing Leonard Leo and his theocratic fascist designs into the pro-democracy coalition, because I just don't think he's committed to anything akin to the rule of law.
It's like the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is still an Opus Dei weirdo. That's I don't know how it sounded in the original Greek, but I think that's how it is. See, I always thought that Leo, just to get back to the FedSoc stuff, like he co-founded the Federalist Society, but he hasn't been in it in a while. And I feel like, and you can correct me because you're in this more than I am, I feel like there's a lot of more rank and file conservative people in the Federalist Society, and Leo's just out in his own, obviously there's overlap, but he's way more reactionary and much more, down with whatever the radical Catholics think than whatever might be going on and decided on at 1776 I Street, which is the address of the Federalist Society. I found out when I mailed him my open letter. Yeah,
I think yes and no. The society has evolved over time. As Leo, yes, he has stepped aside from his day job there as he's branched out into these other dark money empires like the Teneo network. But he remains the, calling all the shots. I'm sure he picked the new president personally. It's a small organization, and he sets its course. He sets its funding. He's very much in control there. And then as to the rank and file membership, I do think that actually earlier in its history, it was more of a debating society. It always very much was focused on idea development and generation towards political and law changing ends. But at this point, it's really a networking hub, a power pipeline where kids get involved. They do it for clerkships or to find community within law schools that are broadly more liberal. And I think these kids come in with a chip on their shoulder, and there is real value in that. I'm sure it's not that easy to have those views on campus, and it's the Alito-esque grievance at having to face criticism and not get dates because of your toxic racist theocratic views that seems like okay for them to have to live with.
Strip search Sammy, you mean?
Yeah, but the FedSoc is not like it's not quite a monolith, but it's not like a ecumenical place for good faith ideas. It's really interesting, actually. There's a guy I really like and respect a lot. We disagree on a lot of questions about constitutional law and policy. He runs an organization. It's worth checking out. It's called the Society for the Rule of Law. His name is Greg Nunziata. He was a Republican Senate staffer, and he's so deeply principled and incredibly courageous and brave. He has, defected from the Republican Party to speak out against Trump's excesses. Of all the people that stuck their neck out to oppose and lead opposition to people like Ed Martin or Emil Gove, these very scary nominees that Trump has put forward, the kind of tip of the spear of weaponization of law, Greg has been, I think, the most outspoken and bravest. And, it's been incredible to watch. And he comes from the Federalist Society. And he's a good faith, principled originalist. He really believes in it. There's a lot of conservative lawyers that really do. But I think, they should take a closer look at actually how it's been implemented in practice, how it's been funded and supported, to what ends it's been developed and advanced to achieve. And I think, and frankly, until we can have some reckoning, both from folks like that, and frankly from liberal lawyers like me, who I think for too long, and I guess I shouldn't take too much personal responsibility, but I think our legal community has not taken their criticisms of the 20th century jurisprudence seriously enough, right? In acting like things like Roe versus Wade, which I agree with, right? I believe there should be fundamental right to abortion access in our country. But to say that the right to abortion in Roe, which derived from the penumbral right of privacy in Griswold, is constitutional law, could not be motivated by outcome-oriented judicial preferences. That's not going to get us very far. And it opened us up to the birth and growth and distortion of originalism to get us here today. So I think there's a lot of common ground to find. It's just a matter of getting going on it pretty soon, because I don't think we have that much time.
Good. Thank you for all of that, because that helps me. Because it helps me. It's hard to keep this shit square. And plus, I'm not a lawyer.
I still haven't really answered your question about the Trump-Leo feud. So.
Yeah, well, who the fuck? I mean,
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, the lawsuit itself, this didn't get covered much, but the lawsuit itself was brought by a Koch-tied, very, very clearly in the Leo network. It was the group that brought Janus to really take out unions during the first Trump presidency. And they don't like these tariffs. The tariffs were hurting these industrialists. And I don't think that these America First isolationists, the Bannons, even the J.D. Vances of the world, or the ultra mega billionaires like Musk and Thiel, I don't think they care about Wall Street. I don't think they care about Charles Koch. I think they're happy to let them suffer for this. That's a bigger conversation. But Trump was freaking out about this Trump judge from the first term that Leo very likely selected, who ruled against him. But underlying that, and I don't even know if Trump knows this, but was litigation that Leo's network was driving to take out his tariff program.
Yeah. So I mean, Leo is definitely more of a conniver, I would say, than Trump will ever be. He's a blunt instrument. I think we can agree. Leo's more of a scalpel, but one you don't even see coming.
I can't imagine that Russ Vought and Leonard Leo don't have very clear, regular communication channels.
I would, yeah. I would think so.
Working on the same project.
Okay, one last question about SCOTUS before we move on to something else. If I remember correctly, June is the end of the term. Mm-hmm. What's coming, and they wait until the last minute to drop all the bad stuff. So what should we be prepared for that will suck? Or are we out of the woods? I don't know.
No, we're not out of the woods, but honestly, I'm going to actually, rather than get into the weeds of this, we have a really great a guide that has
good. Okay.
As I could even pull it up and share my screen, but it would take a second. But it's what we've tried to do with this is take all of the kind of like big politically salient cases and cut through the doctrinal bullshit that make it hard for regular folks to track what's going on. And we have been updating that as the cases come down. Some big ones on the docket still, of course, is the attack on LGBTQ kids, trans kids from the Tennessee AG, the Skermetti case. They seem already very likely to significantly limit the reach of the Bostock decision that Gorsuch authored. And then, interestingly, like some of the big ones have been decided, but so much of the most important action on this court's docket is happening on the shadow docket, where they don't even explain themselves. Often they don't tell you who voted for what. They'll sometimes issue them in one-line rulings, like it was last Friday, a week ago today. Late in the day, as everybody was like commuting home, a lower court stay had been placed on Doge getting all of the access to all of our social security data. Yeah. And in an unsigned, unreasoned 6-3 order, the Supreme Court just decided that case without briefing, without argument. And so it's these kinds of cases that don't get as many headlines because they're not working through the normal process of review that case is effectively over. They're going to keep litigating it, but Doge has the data. So that's kind of the end of the road, and people don't know even why.
Is this on the court accountability page?
Yeah, the court accountability page, and it is under resources, Supreme Court June decisions preview, the Roberts Court's reaps and sows. And I'm just poking around here. There's a lot of them, and some of them have been decided. But one that was decided that folks might have seen was this somewhat surprise 4-4 ruling in the public religious schools case out of Oklahoma. Have you guys talked about that one?
No. Is that the one? Is that the one where I can't remember? Tell us, because
it's the one where
I don't know stuff about law stuff. So the cases because it's masked under. First of all, it always. When the headlines come out, I always have to parse them and be like, does this mean that, is this good or bad? I just want them to be like good or bad. I don't need to know the voting. Like, you're like, the shadow docket votes 6-3. Gee, I wonder who the 6 are. And I wonder who the 3 are. Like, that's not a mystery. No, is this the one where the religious schools can't function as there was the one that Amy Coney Barrett recused?
Yeah, it's that one where a district in Oklahoma tried to, they passed an ordinance, I believe it was, requiring that these religious Christian schools receive public money. And even the very conservative Oklahoma Attorney General opposed that and challenged it to the Supreme Court in Oklahoma. I believe it was a 7-1 or a 7-2 decision by a very conservative Supreme Court in Oklahoma. Went up to the Supreme Court, and when they granted the case, that had everybody very nervous. Everybody that cares about separation of church and state very nervous, because in a posture like that, you wouldn't take the case unless you were going to do something to change it. And so, there was really great reporting from Heidi Prisbilla on the roots of this litigation, which came out of a clinic at Notre Dame that Amy Coney Barrett had, I believe, helped start. She was involved with it. And so we don't actually know why she recused, but she did recuse, which left it in a 4-4 deadlock, which affirmed the lower court's ruling. When there's a deadlock, the lower court opinion just stands. So it's non-precedential, and I think we're still just waiting for the other shoe to drop. But for now, we still have some modicum of separation of church and state. That's been a frustrating line of cases, particularly since quite a few liberal justices have gone along with the erosion of that separation. Cases about church playground resurfacing, where the religious kids wanted to have access to the state program, to the resurfacing, so that they wouldn't skin their knees. Very sympathetic. And Breyer and Kagan both went along, and what that does is it creates a foothold for people like Alito and Thomas to say, oh, look, they went through this, and now we can extend it to this new context.
Yeah. When Alito isn't busy finding some medieval thing from the magistrate from 1542 or whatever to, make it so that women can't, can die legally. I have a couple more questions. Do you have to leave at a certain time?
No,
you're good.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, because I have a lot to ask you. So I want to get back to, all right, SCOTUS, I asked you about that. I want to get back to the Posse Comitatus and the Insurrection Act. Like, I understand now, because I did a deep dive into it, why the Insurrection Act came into being. It seems to me Posse Comitatus basically means that The U.S. military can't function in a law enforcement capacity on U.S. soil. I mean, I'm simplifying, but that's kind of what that means. And invoking the Insurrection Act is necessary to override posse comitatus. So my question really is, what does that look like? Like, let's say Trump invokes the Insurrection Act, and then what? Like, what happens? What can we expect to happen if we go under what is colloquially known as martial law?
Yeah, it would be very scary and bad. I think we would expect pretty rapid deployment of military in blue states and cities quite quickly. I'm going to be watching very closely tomorrow. Let's hope that the No Kings rally is as peaceful and successful and uplifting as the hands-off rallies were a couple months ago. And then it would, very quickly be challenged in the courts. And I think then it would come down to a question of executive power over Insurrection Act invocation and whether the statutory standards are met. And I haven't studied them recently enough to have a clear view on how that would go. At the same time, I think this is a context where the court is likely to be sympathetic to the president's arguments and to the president's prerogative to make national security determinations, even if they have, evidence up out their ears that this guy operates in bad faith, creates pretextual situations to do damaging legal maneuvers. So I don't think it would be good. And then I think there's some other really important state dynamics and congressional dynamics. I think this is going to be a situation where we're going to need to put a huge amount of pressure on state leadership and on Congress, bipartisan pressure on Congress to check, the invocation of martial law and the resulting chaos and certain death, I think, and injury that would happen.
Very, very strongly worded letter then we could expect from them. No, but I'm making light of it, and what you just said is terrifying. But do you have any sense of what it would look like in a very day-to-day way? Because I had Robbie Harris come on my podcast, I don't know, last year or 2 years. I've lost all track of time. Maybe it's 2 years ago. And she was talking about she has experience in countries where democracies fall and what happens when there's real martial law. And I said, what does it look like? And she's like, well, okay, fine. All of the stuff is gone. There's no more Final Four. There's no Super Bowl. You want to go out to a McDonald's, you got to go past a checkpoint and hope that the 16-year-old at the checkpoint with the gun doesn't get an itchy, triggy finger and kill you, and on and on. It was really terrifying. But I feel like that's where we're at. And I'm not a lawyer. I know you obviously know way more about this than me, but looking at the acts, the insurrection stuff, it does seem to give the president a whole lot of leeway to determine what's what. And based on what these justices have done, I would find it very hard to imagine that they wouldn't side with him when he's going to be in there arguing, well, Abraham Lincoln did it. Why can't I? We're both Republicans or whatever. So I guess I don't know what I'm getting at, and I know this is
rebellion, and you can see it in the rhetoric of people like Stephen Miller, who looking at peaceful protests, which at that point I believe were entirely peaceful, was claiming a insurrection on the sovereignty of the United States, which was striking, I thought, in using that word sovereignty, reflecting this kind of like monarchical idea that the sovereign is Trump rather than the people. No, I mean, I think day to day, I don't think it would immediately look like that. It would look like our movie image of, life in a police state, but it could very easily get there before too long. And I think it could happen quickly in certain places that they're trying to instill particular fear and chill upon. I think they want to really hammer these blue states, particularly with the loud governors, right? They want to hammer Illinois. They want to hammer California. They're going to hammer Massachusetts.
Yeah.
So
I don't like it. I don't like it, Alex. I don't like this timeline.
No, it's really bad. It's really bad, and I think that's the thing is they've been softening us up for this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And each step of the way, we get used to whatever new reality is. I think that's one of the kind of amazing things about humans is how resilient and adaptable we are. And it's a little I deal with this dissonance personally as I work on these issues day to day, and then I take my walks in the woods and I can smile, and I find humor and laugh, like love and laughter. And if you look at the experiences of people living under truly brutal regimes, they are able to find that type of joy also. But with assaults like we saw in Padilla, with the normalizing of police presence and the symbolism of the military parade we're going to see tomorrow for his birthday, this is sort of just like getting it in the zeitgeist so that when it starts to get really bad, the New York Times is going to write a headline about how Trump is bending ideas of, like death by paratrooper or something.
I can't even. The New York pitch bot remains the best, the best thing out there. I don't know. Have you seen Andor? Do you watch Andor?
Yeah, it's really great. It's really excellent.
I mean, there's literally a scene in Andor where the stormtroopers come and arrest the senator.
Yeah.
Whose planet is about to get blown up.
I know.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I didn't realize what I was getting into when I watched it. And then I watched it and I said, this is the culture for our time. And it's interesting. There's this new strain of Leo influence work, Leonard Leo's work to sort of perpetrate and insinuate right-wing theocratic culture and values into pop culture. I think they're going to have a much harder time with this project than taking over the courts, where like once you get the power, you can wield the power and stamp out your enemies. I think culture is a much harder thing to influence, but we need more like Andor. That was great.
Good luck with. No, it's so on point. But when I saw Leonard Leo talking about how he wanted to take over Hollywood, I literally just laughed out loud. It's like, dude, no, you're a bunch of artless, tasteless buffoons. No one wants what you're selling. No one's going to watch your dumbass movies. It's just ridiculous. Unless you buy Marvel Comics, then maybe you could slip it into the
right. Well, you never know.
Trump as Thanos kind of thing.
He'd probably pull it off.
All right, so I have 3 more questions for you, and then I will let you go. Is that okay? You got time?
Yeah.
Because I can only ask one if you're running out of time.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Project 2025. You mentioned it a while back, and we knew that they were going to do the Project 2025 thing. We were warned that it was a blueprint. Looking at what they've done so far and where it might be going, and having studied that 960 whatever page document, what do you think is going to be next, like immediately next down the pike, that we should be looking for, just from a Project 2025 as playbook?
They've done so much of it. I mean,
I know
they've literally done so much of it so fast that there's almost not that much left.
When are they going to ban porn? Because that was one of the things Kevin Roberts wanted to do. He was pretty adamant about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
he doesn't want to tar and feather Gavin Newsom.
Yeah. Well, just in terms of like, we knew this was going to happen. A lot of us did. Most people didn't. I thought it was an important success for media, for advocates, everybody, to bring Project 2025 into public awareness. I was at the DNC, which was a bizarre, surreal experience. But the Project 2025, and this actually, I think I've thought about this, because we did so much to try to bring it out of the shadows. We found it in 2023, in the fall of 23, and started connecting the dots on the funders. And we were, banging our heads against the wall, trying to get people to take it seriously. And to see them all holding this giant kind of caricature-sized copy of it was like, wow, we really broke through. They're talking about Project 2025 at the convention. But they also had Kenan Thompson from SNL on there and like making jokes about it. It was so big and like slamming it on the table and like, oh, there's so many pages. And it was like a joke, right? And when we did polling on this, what we found was, and it wasn't just us, a number of our friends and allies did this kind of polling. people hated Project 2025. They hated everything about it in terms of its policy. They did not believe it was going to happen. Trump said he had nothing to do with it. The media never took it seriously enough in terms of the actual stakes of what it proposed to do. They didn't take seriously the operatives behind it. There was a staggeringly irresponsible article in Politico that asked whether Project 2025 was just a mirage. And they had visited the floor on the Heritage Foundation's office, and they said, oh, there's just some cardboard boxes here, and this doesn't look like a real thing. Overlooking the fact that it was funded by hundreds of millions of dollars and over 100 different dark money groups that have serious power and influence. So
who wrote the Politico article? Do you know?
Ian Ward, not to name names.
No, name names.
Yeah. He's a pretty good reporter. He's a pretty good reporter on the new right, on the American political right. And I was dumbstruck at that credulous reporting. And I think it speaks to a big problem that we have in media generally. It's why platforms like yours are so important, so that we can have these conversations without those filters.
Thank you. Kevin Roberts is apparently, have you met Kevin Roberts, by the way? Because he's apparently a really nice guy and kind of like,
all these guys are nice,
charming guys. And all that.
All nice guys. Clarence Thomas is supposed to be like the friendliest guy of the bunch.
Yeah.
Lunch. My wife went to lunch with Clarence Thomas once,
and lived to tell the tale. My sympathies is what I tell her. From me.
Well, apparently, he was very charming.
I'm sure he was.
You get far that way. But in terms of actual Project 2025 implementation, I think one thing to note is that a lot of what they're doing in terms of Project 2025, they're doing it quietly. So, for example, they know abortion is not a good issue for them anymore, and so Trump doesn't want to lead a big national anti-abortion charge. It's not something he particularly cares about. He knows it's important to this base of his, but they're doing it. They're doing it all, right? They're everything on the Project 2025 anti-abortion playbook, except invocation of the ancient Comstock Act, is happening, right? They're creating fake studies to claim that mifepristone is unsafe, so that the FDA will revoke mifepristone. They're trying to defund Planned Parenthood through the reconciliation bill. They've got anti-abortion legal cases going from the same Project 2025 legal network, behind the political network. So it's all happening, right? And we're all too overwhelmed to connect the dots. This insurrection act and the escalating military presence is a giant one. Impoundment, perhaps the most important Project 2025 structural assault. And that one is working its way through the courts. Obviously, this is the federal funding freeze, the claim from Russell Vogt, who developed these ideas at the Center for Renewing America, which was an important hub of Project 2025, around this claimed inherent impoundment authority that they say a president has to decide just not to spend money that Congress has appropriated.
Yeah, that's not a thing. That's clearly, I'm not a scholar, but that's clearly unconstitutional. It just
yeah, but it gets back to this question of like what's unconstitutional, what's the rule of law, and actually, I think one of your questions, because we talked about this before the show, was about what do we do with the Constitution here? There's a contest now over who gets to decide that question, and that's what's at stake with this clash between Trump and Leo and the courts, and it's what Vogt is saying when he testifies in Congress, and they say, "Will you?" or like Hegseth yesterday, refused to say he would comply with a court order, because what they're saying, sometimes explicitly, always implicitly too, is that they decide what the Constitution means. And if the court says something's unconstitutional, tough luck.
Yeah, they just don't pay attention to it, which is really, really, really dangerous. And
and I don't mean to be doomerist about it. I'm not trying to be a doomerist.
No, you're being realistic about it. And that's what we need to know. We need to know what they're planning. Like, if it's not doomerist to say this is what they're planning and this is what we should expect, it's pragmatic, and that's what we need to know, so we don't walk around with our heads up our ass and say, oh, everything's going to be fine, because it's not going to be fine until something gets done about it. So so I have two more questions.
One amendment though, because I think it actually is important, because I sort of maybe gave short shrift to your correct statement that this is not a thing, it's not constitutional. Like, we shouldn't give that up, even as we see the Constitution being manipulated by bad actors who have seized and aggrandized their power. We shouldn't give up our citizen citizenry, our citizenry's ownership of this constitution, our ability to read words and understand their meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Which is what the birthright thing is another thing. It's fucking says it. That's what it is. So, okay. I have two questions. Oh, go ahead.
Greg, I'm sorry to that's going to be really bad. Like that oral argument was really, really bad. So, that's a big, big decision.
If they fuck that,
well,
the country's
they're going to do
if that happens.
They're going to do it without doing it. They're not going to reach the merits. The merits weren't at issue in the case. All that was really at issue in that argument was the power of lower court judges to issue nationwide relief to classes of plaintiffs who were similarly situated, groups of plaintiffs. The validity of these very important nationwide injunctions that are stopping the harm temporarily as the cases work their way up. And my reading of that argument, I listened to it, was that the majority justices seem pretty comfortable with taking more power for themselves to decide every question of nationwide relief, taking that away from the lower courts. And on this question of birthright citizenship, what seems to be happening, and our guide gets into this in good detail at courtaccountability.org. Like and subscribe. Is
like and subscribe, and TruePlayer has been putting the links in the chat room, by the way.
Oh, amazing! Excellent.
People will see it, and
wonderful.
Yeah.
It is a regime through which, rather than be born and enjoy birthright citizenship as of right, you would have to sue individually to have your citizenship recognized, which you can see, and they'll get a headline that say, oh, they don't. They don't affect birthright citizenship. They delay. There's a world in which that case can never make it to the Supreme Court because the party that loses would have to bring the petition. And anytime Trump loses one of those individualized cases, there's no reason for them to do that. They can just keeping those roadblocks up for all the other hundreds of thousands of birthright citizen kids that get born here and need to go through this burdensome process that we just don't have the legal resources to provide.
Maybe we should let the Russian kids that are born at Sunny Isles who are American citizens, maybe that's the way to attack it, because I don't think Trump's allowed to push back on that.
There's all sorts of historical precedent about citizenship of foreign kids born on Air Force bases and all that.
No, when you don't have birthright citizenship, then you have a permanent underclass, and that's really, really, really bad. Okay, I've got one more. I'm going to have one more question because the other one's too long. And you brought this up, so I don't even know exactly what it means. I'm very curious about it. So you said something about affirmative constitutional vision that
we might need some better messaging.
I like it. It's this. I like this, but what does that mean? And what should actually, it is the same question. What should the Democrats be doing? If you're talking to them and you're the coach, you're Rick Carlisle in the Pacers locker room, what are you telling them to do? You have to do this. Talk about this idea that you have, because it seems like it's good.
Some of it is what they should have been doing for a long time now. Some of it is also what they should be doing now. Of course, they're largely out of power, so that the actual levers that they have to pull, drawing on some of the ideas I'll get into, are limited, but I do think that they could start to form a pretty powerful constitutional politics for the Democratic Party, for the pro-democracy community more broadly. And ironically, we see Trump tapping into some of these arguments around popular ownership of the Constitution. So very, very long story short, folks might be familiar with the old case Marbury versus Madison, where the Chief Justice John Marshall declared famously that it is emphatically the province and the duty of the judiciary to say what the law is. Mm-hmm. And over time, that power of judicial review to look at two laws and say which one supersedes which has been really changed and distorted in a fashion as to grow the power of the courts to decide the meaning of the Constitution effectively exclusively. Right? For all of our lives, we've been used to this regime where if there's a contest over the constitutionality of a statute or some state action, it's the U.S. Supreme Court that gets to decide that question. But it hasn't really always been that way. And there have been big fights about that in the nation's history. There's a really great quote. Folks might have heard this if they listened to Slate's Amicus podcast last weekend. A friend of mine, really brilliant thinker. We both like to use these quotes from Lincoln and John Roberts to sort of show these.
Is it Dahlia? Is it Dahlia's
podcast? Dahlia.
We love Dahlia on this show.
Dahlia's the best. But Lincoln, after the at his first inaugural, after the horrible, infamous, notorious Dred Scott decision, the Fugitive Slave Act, dealing with this deeply reactionary court, he said, "The candid citizen must confess that if the policy of the government upon the vital questions affecting the whole people is to be irrevocably fixed by the decisions of the Supreme Court, the people will have ceased to be their own rulers." Right? The people have a really important role to play here. And over time, and Democrats and liberals and civil rights lawyers and all of the kind of heroes of 20th century law from kind of our community, they're kind of part of this, right? A little complicit in it, and for good and understandable reasons, because we've never really had a properly functioning democracy in this country. We've never properly reckoned with slavery or the women's lack of access to the franchise. And so for all these reasons, progressives and civil rights advocates, especially in the 20th century, they really look to the courts for the preservation, creation in some cases, of these rights and freedoms. We talked about Roe earlier, right? Like it was, they did that through the courts because they couldn't do it democratically, which on some levels is problematic, even if we agree with the outcome. And even if that judicial project was more intellectually honest and more concerned about reflecting popular will and shepherding unanimity. Almost all those big decisions were 9-0 decisions. In contrast, we've seen, by virtue and as a result of Leonard Leo's court capture operation and the Federalist Society's influence on the courts, the aggrandizement of this judicial power and the use of constitutional meaning as a cudgel against the people, as a weapon against democracy. And Roberts' quote from 2009, "The most important thing for the public to understand is that we're not a political branch of government. They do not elect us. If they don't like what we're doing, it's more or less just too bad." So, this is the world
Did he say just too bad? Did he really say that?
Just too bad. Just too bad. Tough luck.
Oh, what a fucker. Sorry.
Billionaires can spend unlimited money in politics because we decide that that's what the First Amendment means, even though there's no originalist basis for that and no textualist basis for it. Too bad. We decide that the Second Amendment means that communities can't regulate weapons of war. Too bad. And we've all taken it lying down. The Democrats have taken it lying down. The lawyers have taken it lying down. We just keep, we just keep making our arguments on this rapidly shifting sand. We're falling into a pit, and we're making legal arguments before bad faith judges who aren't interested in the resolution of these disputes. So there's some really smart thinking in the academy and in history. Actually, the guy that was the dean of my law school when I was a 1L wrote this book in 2004 called The People Themselves that sort of got this idea into the zeitgeist of the people own the Constitution. We are the sovereign. The Congress acting on our behalf has real ownership stake in the Constitution in deciding constitutional meaning. We've made some good progress in pushing these ideas into action on the Hill. Not enough to make a real difference, but moving in the right direction, really important. So like last year, after Trump versus United States came down and announced that the president actually is a king, Chuck Schumer and 36 Senate Democrats introduced a bill called the No Kings Act that used a provision in, there you go, a provision in Article 3 of the Constitution that they almost never use, but have used successfully, called the Exceptions Clause, which allows Congress to set exceptions and regulations to the court's appellate jurisdiction. They stripped their jurisdiction to decide these questions. They said, we disagree with you on this immunity question, and if this question comes up again in a lawsuit, you can't hear it because you don't have jurisdiction to hear it. The court is a court of limited jurisdiction. Its appellate jurisdiction makes up 99% of its docket. So there's a political world that we could make where a Congress passes a bill to overturn Citizens United by statute without constitutional amendment, strips their jurisdiction to say anything about it. Sure, they'll say that's unconstitutional, but then we've got a real fight about who gets to decide constitutional meaning. And just like Trump is very clearly understands what are they going to do to enforce it. And I think on principle and constitutional theory, there's a much, much stronger case for Congress, particularly in tandem with the president, in defense of a law that has been passed through bicameralism and presentment, to say, no, court, sorry, versus what Trump is doing, which is unilateral action, maybe sometimes with, complicit silence from his MAGAs in Congress. But, there's a lot of distinctions, but it's been really, really disturbing and fascinating to watch Trump and MAGA pick up this popular constitutionalism theme as they say that the courts are conducting a coup against their mandate. So that's enough. That's a wonky talk. So this stuff's it's really important. We haven't had an idea to cohere a legal movement or a political movement around the Constitution in the way that they have had for decades. So we need to have that. Like, we're not going to do it by just like bumping around in the night as the Democrats in the Senate do. If you watch their first judiciary confirmation hearing last week, it was like an embarrassment. Like they have no idea, they have no agenda. There's no strategy across the members. They just want to ask something and then get out of there. So what can we do as a community of people that care about the Constitution, as lawyers, as citizens, to connect the dots to the things we care about and make our power heard so that those folks get their act together up there?
We have to go on the offensive, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
We have to go on the offensive.
And it's also like, it just feels really necessary in a moment of such bleak fear. Like, all of these feelings are the intentional products of authoritarianism, apathy, helplessness, people checking out. So we got to find something for hope, something real, right? Not the fool's gold of lower court injunctions that make us feel better for 2 months, but something real and durable.
Yeah. I don't think I can speak for everyone watching this. No one feels good about lower court injunctions. We're just like, that's not going to fly. So it reminded me of when you were saying the court's going to do this, but then it's going to get overruled by Congress. It's like what Stalin said about the Pope. Like, oh, the Pope says this. And Stalin's like, yeah, how many battalions does the Pope have? And that's it. So yeah, that's how it goes. I want to ask you one more question, and it's a number. The answer is a number. And then I will release you into the night. And this has been fantastic. And I'm so glad you're able to come on, because we needed to hear all this. And I haven't seen you in a while, and I really wanted to pick your brain on all these things. And I feel like now I understand everything better, and I feel more hopeful about, when they send me to the prison in El Salvador, I'm going to feel more happy about it. So, okay, here's the question.
We're going to need our Navalny's, Greg. You're getting Navalny.
I'm not. Yeah, no. Okay, so if you were going to expand the Supreme Court, I don't need any larger thing, just a number. How many Supreme Court justices should we have?
I'm going to fight the hypo, as they say in law school. Don't fight the hypo. I don't think it matters, right? It's not about the number of the Supreme Court. I mean, it's interesting. There was this big Save the Nine dark money effort.
Oh,
I don't know who funded that one, but that was a big thing. And now that Trump's in power and the court isn't just rubber stamping everything, using Trump's truth social posts as the text of their opinions. Now they want to expand the court because the originalists are too squishy.
Right.
I think we never really got behind the big push to try to expand the court. And the reason was, one, and this isn't something that usually keeps us from doing stuff, because a lot of the stuff we try to do, we know isn't going to succeed. Like, the political will wasn't there. My old boss, Senator.
I remember he said it. He said it on my podcast.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's like the biggest, most aggressive champion against judicial abuse of power, and in the whole Senate. And he wasn't close to getting there. But more fundamentally, it doesn't solve the problem, right? It doesn't solve the problem we just discussed about who gets to decide. And I'm much more interested in reforms that deal with that. So, term limits, I think, actually would help a lot in terms of stopping these strategic retirements, and maybe would do something to diminish the extent to which these justices are thinking about their jurisprudence in terms of a long game, which is deeply messed up, right? Because they're always talking about the case and controversy requirement, because they're supposed to decide these cases just on the case and like, this is a case, they're supposed to resolve it, but they're building a political project through the law. So it might do something like that. like our idea of court reform is Congress doing stuff to check the courts, constrain the courts, supervise it, do oversight, issue subpoenas when there's evidence of corruption, really make them earn their appropriations. So with a proposal like I had before, like overturning Citizens United by statute, using the exceptions clause, you could have a provision in there that says, if you deem this jurisdiction stripping invalid, your funding for the next fiscal year is cut, or except for your security funding. I don't think anybody wants to cut security funding for the judges right now. So sorry to fight your hype.
I don't know. I don't know. My answer is 27. Yeah, fuck it. Harder for Leonard Leo to buy 27 judges
Probably
than
more,
to buy 9. He only has to buy 6.
Then it really is a legislature.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a legislature.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, that's true. Anyway, okay, so your organization is called Court Accountability, and there's the Bluesky.
Yeah.
Anybody wants to go check it out, please sign up for the mailing list. It's great information. It's a 501c3, so if you have money lying around, you want to give money to a great cause, this is a great cause to give money to. And do you have anything else you want to plug while you're here?
It's there on the website, but we have our newsletters on Substack, which I don't know about that, but it's called Tilted Skills. It's really good stuff. I've been really proud of our team and what they're putting out. One or two newsletters a week, really rich in content and calls to action and stuff like that.
Excellent. Alex Aronson, so great to see you. Thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight.
Thanks, Greg. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Take care. Okay. I'm here by myself, and it's like an hour and a half, of course. It's like the longest show. Thanks so much to Alex. I love Alex. I'm so glad he came on, and we were able to give him the platform and see what he had to say. This is not the thing that I want. Is it this one? No. There we go. This is the one that I like. So I'm not like overwhelming on this. Quickly, before we sign off, on this very day, a group of Nobel laureates and professors, academics, most of whom are experts in fascism, wrote and circulated the manifesto of the anti-fascist intellectuals 100 years later, which I have gone and signed. And just to send us out on a positive note, I want to read the letter. And this is the thing. You can go to stopreturnfascism.org. That's the website, stopreturnfascism.org. And this is a thing. It was drafted by, people that include Timothy Snyder and our friend of the show, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, and other fascism scholars, as well as a lot of academics. It's hundreds of people. This just came out today. So I'm going to read it to you. And that's what we're going to do. Okay, here we go. On May 1st, 1925, with Benito Mussolini already in power, a group of Italian intellectuals publicly denounced his fascist regime in an open letter. The signatories, scientists, philosophers, writers, and artists took a stand in support of the essential tenets of a free society: the rule of law, personal liberty, and independent thinking, culture, art, and science. Their open defiance against the brutal imposition of the fascist ideology at great personal risk proved that opposition was not only possible, but necessary. Today, 100 years later, the threat of fascism is back. It is back. Okay. And so we must summon the courage and defy it again. Fascism emerged in Italy a century ago, marking the advent of modern dictatorship. Within a few years, it spread across Europe and the world, taking different names but maintaining similar forms. Whenever it seized power, it undermined the separation of powers in the service of autocracy, silenced opposition through violence, took control of the press, halted the advancement of women's rights, and crushed workers' struggles for economic justice. Inevitably, it permeated and distorted all institutions devoted to scientific, academic, and cultural activities. Its cult of death exalted imperial aggression and genocidal racism, triggering the Second World War, the Holocaust, the death of tens of millions of people, and crimes against humanity. At the same time, The resistance to fascism and the many other fascist ideologies became a fertile ground for imagining alternative ways of organizing societies and international relations. The world that emerged from the Second World War, with the Charter of the UN, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the theoretical foundations of the EU, and the legal arguments against colonialism, remained marked by deep inequalities. Yet, it represented a decisive attempt to establish an international legal order, an aspiration toward global democracy and peace, grounded in the protection of universal human rights, including not only civil and political, but also economic, social, and cultural rights. Fascism never vanished, but for a time it was held at bay. However, in the past 2 decades, we've witnessed a renewed wave of far-right movements, often bearing unmistakably fascist traits, attacks on democratic norms and institutions, a reinvigorated nationalism laced with racist rhetoric, authoritarian impulses, and systematic assaults on the rights of those who do not fit a manufactured traditional authority rooted in religious, sexual, and gender normativity. These movements have reemerged across the globe, including in long-standing democracies like the United States, where widespread dissatisfaction with political failure to address mounting inequalities and social exclusion has once again been exploited by new authoritarian figures. True to the old fascist script under the guise of an unlimited popular mandate, these figures undermine national and international rule of law, targeting the independence of the judiciary, the press, the institutions of culture, higher education, and science, even attempting to destroy essential data and scientific information. They fabricate alternative facts and invent enemies within. They weaponize security concerns to entrench their authority and that of the ultra-wealthy 1%, offering privileges in exchange for loyalty. This process is now accelerating as dissent is increasingly suppressed through arbitrary detentions, threats of violence, deportations, and an unrelenting campaign of disinformation and propaganda operated with the support of traditional and social media barons. Some merely complacent, others openly techno-fascist enthusiasts. Cough, Peter Thiel, cough. That's me saying cough, Peter Thiel, cough. They didn't write that. Democracies are not flawless. They are vulnerable to misinformation, and they are not yet sufficiently inclusive. However, democracies, by their nature, provide fertile ground for intellectual and cultural progress, and therefore always have the potential to improve. In democratic societies, human rights and freedoms can expand, the arts flourish, scientific discoveries thrive, and knowledge grow. They grant the freedom to challenge ideas and question power structures, propose new theories even when culturally uncomfortable, which is essential to human advancement. Democratic institutions offer the best framework for addressing social injustices and the best hope to fulfill the post-war promises of the rights to work, education, health, social security, participation in cultural and scientific life, and the collective right of peoples to development, self-determination, and peace. Without this, humanity faces stagnation, growing inequality, injustice, and catastrophe, not least from the existential threat caused by the climate emergency that the new fascist wave negates. In our hyper-connected world, democracy cannot exist in isolation. As national democracies require strong institutions, international cooperation relies on the effective implementation of democratic principles and multilateralism to regulate relations among nations and on multi-stakeholder processes to engage a healthy society. One more page. The rule of law must extend beyond borders, ensuring that international treaties, human rights conventions, and peace agreements are respected. While existing global governance and international institutions require improvement, their erosion in favor of a world governed by raw power, transactional logic, and military might is a regression to an era of colonialism, suffering, and destruction. As in 1925, we scientists, philosophers, writers, artists, and citizens of the world, and co-hosts of live YouTube shows, have a responsibility to denounce and resist the resurgence of fascism in all its forms. We call on those who value democracy to act defend democratic, cultural, and educational institutions, call out abuses of democratic principles and human rights, refuse preemptive compliance, join collective actions locally and internationally, boycott and strike when possible, make resistance impossible to ignore and costly to repress, uphold facts and evidence, foster critical thinking, and engage with your communities on these grounds. This is an ongoing struggle. Let our voices, our work, and our principles be a bulwark against authoritarianism. Let this message be a renewed declaration of defiance. Or, as we like to say here when we wrap up the 5-8, we're going to get through it.